22nd of this month. Kindly settle down, sir. Excuse me. Thank you, sir. Settle down, please. Okay, good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I think people are just settling down. I thought by the time they settle down, I'll share with you what's happening in next few days at MMA. 22nd of December, we have measured what matters, read and grow series, not to miss it. On 23rd, we have a full day evening seminar along with Institute of Cost and Works Account, India at 100, growth trajectory for banks. We have got almost most of the managing directors of the banks are coming and talking to us, sharing their insights. They're also going to talk about the stress assets and what's the way forward in technology and many things. Not to miss this event, but you have to register because we have got a full house for this almost. It's happening at 5 p.m. on 23rd evening, followed by dinner. Then on Wednesday, 26th of January, we have discussion on the theme free ice cream. It's again interesting subject, how a lot of things can be made free if you are efficiently managed, and where is using technology and other methodology to really make sure how we can get things so much less is almost free. Then on Thursday, 5th of January, we have building robust academic entrepreneurial ecosystem. Again, we have Professor Ashwin Magalingam, IIT Madras, done some phenomenal work in this area, and how academicians and academic institutions can promote the ecosystem. IIT Madras is one area where it's really done extremely well. So you'll be able to really do that. And we're also on 26th of this month also, we're trying to do something on chips, and one of the international speaker from US Asia, we are trying to connect with him and do that, and what it means for chips manufacturing and what are the geopolitical issues and where do we stand, where the technology stand. He's authority on the subject. He's spoken recently in Delhi. He's visiting Chennai, so we are trying to get him over. And if it happens, it'll be very good. On the 6th of January, we are again having a very nice event, decarbonizing India, charting the pathway for sustainable growth, which is very important. Naveen Nuni, senior partner, McKinsey, is the author of the special report. We have got some outstanding panelists here too. Please do join us. Then on 20th of January, we have the third V. Narayanan Pons Memorial Endowment Lecture. Again, we have an outstanding speaker. I think we should all walk milestream. He's going to be talking. Mr. Manish Tiwari is head of Amazon India Consumer. He's going to be there. He's going to be talking to us the future of e-tailing and future of technology, and on that subject, Manish Tiwari will be here. On Tuesday, again, we have a very interesting event under the Women's Business Forum. Well left, the theme, and the speaker is Bharati Bhaskar. Bharati Bhaskar, you all know, the famous TV. She comes in a lot of debates in television, good speaker. She's going to be talking to us on this very important thing. And well left, what does she mean is she's taking a relevance to the Ashwin leaving the ball when the India-Pakistan match, and where he got one extra run, one extra ball, where next ball Virat Kohli is able to score a 6 and India won the match. She says, taking a relevance to that how many things in your life, sometimes you have to leave it actually. So when it's well left, sometimes you prosper so well. How you take such a thing and how to leave, she's going to be talking, and she's a brilliant speaker. So some of them, and there are so many things happening in the chapters and our outreach program. We have Mr. Bhanukumar talking to us on 21st December at Industry 4.0 Future Ready at Puducherry. Then on Mr. Purushothaman will be talking to us relevance of 26 AS and TS at Bhupati & Co. It's tax related. Nandakumar Gopal will be talking to us work-life balance and imperative for professional success instead of Foundryman. This is again followed by dinner. So we have events spread out all over the city, so you can pick and choose whichever you want to come and attend and enrich yourself. Coming to today's topic, very interesting and thought-provoking, and many people must be really looking at it, what's happening. Managing national defense post-1962. And this is a discussion. We have got some outstanding panelists to come and talk to us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome the distinguished panelists for this evening. N Sathiya Moorthy, Convenor of Policy Matters, and Air Marshal Matheswaran, Air Veteran, colleague in the Air Force, AVSM and VM and PhD. and Mr. Balamurugan, outstanding scientist director, combat vehicle. Balamurugan joined. Welcome, Mr. Balamurugan. So good to see you online. And we thought good you could join us on online rather than we don't want to miss even a minute of your time, because your thoughts and input is very, very valuable for the deliberation this evening. Then we also have Stanley Johny, who is the International Affairs Editor of Hindu. May I request the distinguished dignitary please take their place on the dais. Mr. Air Marshal Matheswaran, Stanley, and Mr. Sathiya Moorthy. Mr. Balamurugan was in a conference until about 5 minutes back, and he was unable to come. By the time we drive down from HUF tank factory and come here, I'm sure he will reach only after 8 o'clock. So we request you to join us online. Thank you so much, sir. Immediately obliging us to join us online. Indeed privilege. And the format of the evening is as usual. All the viewers watching the program, very warm welcome to you for joining this evening. As usual, if you have any question, please share it on the number which is flash on the screen, and we'll place it before the thing. And if you notice the theme, it's really provoking. So please don't ask the question relevant to the subject. Managing national defense post 62 doesn't mean Doklam or Tamang, what's happening, war, China, India. No, not the subject is going to be discussed. So if you have anything, queries, all on how much we are self-sustained and Atmanirbhar thing, how geopolitical thing is going to issue on issues, those relevant, which are very, very interesting. So keep your question relevant to that. And Mr. Sathiya Moorthy will give the opening remarks and set the context. Thereafter, he will request each of the speakers to share their insight for the time, which he will be recommended around 5 to 10 minutes, sir, for each speaker to speak their insights on the theme. Thereafter, we'll have a brief discussion. Then we'll take on to the Q&A, and the questions what is received online will also be placed. So we'll try and we have still 1 hour, 15 minutes totally with us. Before I'll hand it over to Sathiya Moorthy, let me have the privilege of introducing distinguished panelists for this evening, who was really agreed to come and speak to us on this subject. Air Marshal Matheswaran, AVSM VM PhD, is founder president of Peninsula Foundation, and Air Marshal is a Air Force veteran of over 39 years of service, and is a founder president of Peninsula, as I mentioned earlier. He's a fighter pilot, a test pilot, and experimental test pilot, a fighter combat leader, and has flown over 40 years of aircraft. I have seen him closely in the Air Force, one of the finest officers with a lot of passion and perseverance to do the best. And he has also held various operational commands, appointments such as including Senior Air Officer, Eastern Air Command, Assistant Chief of Naval Air Staff, Air Officer Maritime at Operation Principal Director of Air Staff Acquisitions, and Director of Strategic Forces Command. And he has been advisor of HAL and also the president of Aerospace Business Reliance Defense, and he continues to be involved in strategic consultancy of defense and aerospace. Air Marshal is the recipient of the Presidential Award, Adivasi Seva Medal, and Vishit Seva Medal, and VM and Vayu Sena Medal, and commendation by the Chief of Air Staff. Very warm welcome to you, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Let me have the privilege of introducing our another distinguished panelist for this evening, Mr. Balamurugan, outstanding scientist director and director of Combat Vehicle Research Development Establishment, is CVRDE. And Balamurugan is outstanding scientist, has taken over as director of CVRDE, obtained his bachelor degree in Mechanical Engineering, College of Engineering, Guindy, master degree in industrial meteorology from Indian Institute of Technology, business administration and technology management from Bharatdasan Institute of Management, Trichy. He is also a recipient of Lab Scientist of the Year Award, Lab Technology Group Award of DRDO Performance Excellence. He has also received a Commander's Commendation Card in recognition of his devotion to duty. Hello, excuse me, sir. Would you like to go out and speak? Thanks. And distinguished service. He is a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers, and anybody should be envy of seeing his profile, outstanding profile. And due to paucity of time, I'm not able to read out. It's there in the website. You can reach. And thank you so much, Mr. Balamurugan. It's a pleasure to have you with us online.
Yeah, thank you.
And maybe next time we look forward to seeing you. Then let me have the privilege of introducing Dr. Stanley Johny. He's not new to our MMA members. He's the International Affairs Editor of the Hindu. Stanley, and the Hindu is he runs the international news pages of the newspaper and writes opinion and editorials on geopolitics, Middle East, and foreign policy, besides doing special reports. He earned his PhD in international studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University, in Delhi. He has reported for Hindu Group and Brussels, Luxembourg City, Moscow, Singapore, and many other countries. And he has also written research papers on well commented on various publications. Johny is also an adjunct faculty member of the Asian College of Journalism, Chennai. His book, Baghdad's World, is forthcoming, and the Penguin Random House. And we also published a book which he wrote recently on another subject which was discussed in MMA. Very warm welcome to you, Stanley. It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Sathiya Moorthy. He is the convener of Policy Matters. Sathiya Moorthy is the one who has been driving the initiative between MMA and Policy Matters and bringing out some outstanding programs every month. And he's a policy analyst, is a political commentator, specializing in study of India's southern neighbors, namely he is an authority on Sri Lanka and Maldives. He has written extensively of the subject, both books and newspapers, columns, and commissioned number of articles. Sathiya Moorthy is associated with major newspapers and TV channels both in India and Sri Lanka. A veteran journalist and author, is a convener of the Policy Matter and great supporter of MMA and its activities. Once again, welcome to you, Mr. Sathiya Moorthy, and warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our distinguished panelists for this evening. Now I'll hand it over to Mr. Sathiya Moorthy to take it forward. Over to you, Mr. Sathiya Moorthy.
Thank you, Group Captain J. Kumar. Good evening, everybody. I'm not going to give you a lecture, as you know. And the subject matter of the synopsis is there in the synopsis in the invite you would have seen. But there is a reason why we have this session today. We are just trying to find out what has happened over the last 60, 70 years, from 1960 on, in our defense preparedness. That is a concept here. Yes, the temptation for many of you will be to think and also shoot your questions based on what is happening in recent times along our borders. But we go beyond that. Because in 62, we lost our war, let us accept. But 65, we could rebound. And 71, we had a real victory that has not been rewritten by or written by anyone else in the neighborhood or elsewhere. Such a comprehensive victory no one else has recorded in military terms and even political terms. Then in between we had even just the decade after the Chinese war or whatever we call it, we had Pokhran 1 nuclear test, then Pokhran 2. After that, we also had Kargil. So, India's defense preparedness has been growing from strength to strength from the lessons that we learned in 1962. There may have been a lot to unlearn also, which again we seem to have done. To give us a greater perspective, we have three speakers who have been dealing with this, and of course, Air Marshal, as you know, has been there, working there, and he's also a scholar, academic, and also a practitioner, which is a rare quality and a rare combination, whether it is in the academics or in the services. Like which we have got a serving officer, scientist, director of CVRDE, and a very active foreign policy editor. The idea is to get what made us rather strong enough, or are we strong enough, or where we are heading and where we have to go. With that brief introduction, I invite Air Marshal Matheswaran.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I thank Vijay and Mr. Sathiya Moorthy for having put this together. It's a very interesting topic, and particularly what's there in the news with respect to what's happening on the line of actual control near Tawang. I think there's a lot of interest, and I can see a lot of known faces. And pleasure to see all of you here. Well, the topic is management of national defense post 62. 62 is a milestone. We lost a war, right? When a nation loses a war, the accountability goes right to the top leadership. And in history, no leadership has ever been spared by any country when you lose a war. We have come around, and there are many reasons. There are a lot of factors of culture, civilization, and many other factors that have come into it. But Jawaharlal Nehru, the architect of independent India, who set very strong foundations on very important strategic areas, was heartbroken in 1962 after the war. And those of you who want to read what went on in his mind, read the letter he writes to John F. Kennedy on November 19th, one day before the Chinese declared ceasefire, requesting assistance to save, it's quite humiliating to read that letter. So 62 was a disastrous milestone in Indian history. There are many reasons that why it happened. And for that, let me give few important, rather two important quotes from very well-known scholars and practitioners. One is Clausewitz, who says war is politics by other means. So political leadership must be well versed in the issue of war and policy and why war is necessary to understand it effectively. The other person is a Roman general called Vigitius, who almost 2000 years ago, who said, if you desire peace, be prepared for war. If you put these two together, when you have your strategy is well built up, and if a country goes through without fighting a war, you've actually done your job. You achieve your objectives, and that's what Sun Tzu says. Achieve your objectives without actually fighting a war is the best way to actually resolve a conflict or win over your adversaries. So these are all important factors. So what went wrong in 62? Well, as I said, if you read, those of you who read Nehru's Discovery of India will very clearly understand that his ambition for India was to be a leader in the international order. India is a young country that was put together in 1947 as a modern nation state, an ancient civilization. But that book is a fabulous book to read. And there are many other leading freedom fighters, including Gandhi, who actually expressed that India has a place at the top on the international order. The problem with that was, and that's a paradox, Nehru was also a realist. Therefore, he laid down the foundations on the advice of Homi Bhabha and the others, the foundations for nuclear capability in India, and also the space capability. And along with Krishna Menon, who we all abuse for much of the responsibility for what went in 62, laying down the foundations of the defense industry as well. There were certain fundamental flaws, which is they all believed that India will not initiate war with anyone, doesn't desire or covet anybody else's territory. And therefore, we need to have minimal capability because we don't want to threaten anybody else. They didn't read, despite Vallabhbhai Patel's warning, China's within 1 month having taken over Xinjiang after having been declared as a PRC in 1949, October 1st. Within 1 month, Xinjiang was occupied, and within 6 months, Tibet was occupied. And that was the clear indication. He didn't read that warning. And therefore, the army was not very well prepared, or the military was not very well prepared. That's one. Ill-equipped, not prepared for the border regions. They didn't even, the political leadership didn't even understand the nuances and the difficulties of the border terrain. And therefore, when China continued to create problems on the border, as it's happening now, we were not very well prepared. We kept believing that war will not happen. And then when 62 happened, you are completely shattered. We could have still not lost the war if, given the capabilities of the Indian Air Force that existed at that point of time, Nehru had actually taken a decision to use the Air Force. The Chinese couldn't have come down through the Sailor Pass down to Misamari. That wouldn't have happened. The air path that was available, we would have made a mincemeat out of them. The Chinese withdrew after November 20th was simply because the logistics and the winters would not have enabled them to stay there. They would have not survived. And the Chinese Air Force or the PLA Air Force in the 60s had no reach anywhere into the higher regions of Tibet. We never used the air power other than for airlifting a few people. And therefore, these were fundamental strategic mistakes. But how did we address national defense post that? We woke up. It was a solid boot on our backside, the defeat. And that turned around how we looked at defense. He instituted a Tata committee to look at many things. And first, of course, was beefing up the numbers and the weapons in the Indian military itself. The army went from less than 200,000 and over the next decade, plus today we are 1.1 million is the army alone. The three services put together, we are 1.4, the third largest military in the world. And the equipments were now looked at and a rapid buildup of military capability in terms of production of equipment and arming the military. Ayub Khan thought, here's a shattered military. Nehru died by 64, and Lal Bahadur Shastri was seen not very well judged by the others. They thought he would be inexperienced. And Ayub Khan thought, here's India, which is still not recovered from 62 defeat, and we'll sort them out. So they tested the waters in Rann of Kutch in April, May, and then launched the Operation Gibraltar in 65 in September. And here was the mettle of a leader on the advice of the military. Instead of limiting ourselves to J&K, now to take the battle to the adversary, he said, open the attacks on the international border. We were few miles away from Lahore in the later part of September. But once again, strategic decisions sometimes, this is an excellent strategic decisions. So the war is actually seen as a stalemate by professionals. You can call it as a victory. Yes, we stopped. The Pakistan designs were defeated and they didn't get anything what they wanted. But at the end of the day, by military professionals, it's seen as a stalemate. We've done fairly well in certain sectors. And then, of course, the Tashkent Declaration Agreement and Shastri's death, and some of the getting back to the pre-war lines, I would say is a strategic mistake. 71 was one of the finest executed wars in military history and national histories of the world. And here you had a political leadership who was extremely savvy. Indira Gandhi was the best leader you could have had at that point of time. And she was realistic. She was ruthless. And she had a diplomatic corps that advised her quite well. And she had an exceptional military leadership. Manekshaw, P.C. Lal, and Chatterjee. And they put together and they prepared themselves. So on paper, and this is, I don't know whether you want to quote or not quote. Well, we prepared ourselves for the war and we prosecuted a war at the time of our choosing. And we created conditions to shape the battlefields the way we wanted to. And we prosecuted the war the way we wanted to. We also shaped the international system by signing the Friendship Treaty with the Soviet Union in August and shaping the UN Security Council to our advantage for the period that we wanted. So you have diplomacy, political leadership, and military strategy working beautifully in this entire process. The 71 is much better blitzkrieg in Bangladesh, the eastern sector, than the blitzkrieg that the Germans executed in the Low Countries and in France, right? So this was an exhibition of that Indian political leadership can rise to the occasion when it's required, and we did that. And the other factors that come into play are in terms of technology, in terms of national defense is incomplete if we don't understand the international order. International order is a ruthless one. And when you aspire to be a great power, the existing hegemons or the existing major powers will want to retain the status quo. They don't like a rising power. And what do they do when they don't like a rising power? When they don't like a rising power, they'll make sure there is an economic constraint that will be built upon you. There will be technology denials that will work against you. And you will be targeted in a post-1945 nuclear world. You'll be targeted if you want to go nuclear. And that's what we went through. So deterrence was an extremely important requirement. And Indira Gandhi's decision to go nuclear in 74 is an extremely brave decision. But thereafter, we had weak legs. We should have followed it up consistently post-74, but our economic situations and weak technological base did not give enough or inspire enough confidence in the political leadership. And therefore, handling of national defense post-74, I would say the military had a lot of imported capabilities, imported weapons. Military was extremely fit and battle ready. But as a nation who wants to be a rising power, we were weak. And that took a long time. And we paid a lot of penalty for that. And that process was corrected. And everybody had a role. Post Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi had a role in that process of development. And then Narasimha Rao played extremely crucial roles in changing the economy. And then Vajpayee's government, one of the finest combinations of ministers, they played an extremely good role. So in 98, when we went again and declared ourselves a nuclear weapon state, the government was ready for multiple strategies how the existing hegemons would come at us. And we dealt with it successfully. So this is an excellent example of managing the defense, national defense extremely well. And today, the same guys who didn't want us to go nuclear, they've given you exemption from NPT. They've recognized you as a nuclear weapon state. They don't pressure you on nuclear governance group. You're part of MTCR and you're a nuclear weapon state. And that's extremely important. But finally, I mean, time is short and I don't want to take too much of time. But finally, what matters in today's world in defense is control over critical technologies. And where are we? You hear the Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat in a big way. That is where our strategy has suffered. And it's a big paradox. We've created a strategy that worked well and achieved our objectives in atomic energy and space. But in the other dimension of defense technologies, defense industrial base, and private sector entry, which was banned for a long time due to a flawed policy, which was opened up later after 2001, has created certain serious weaknesses. And I'm sure the scientists will now address, because we are addressing a lot of those weaknesses. Notwithstanding that, the defense of a nation depends on its economic strength. In the 21st century, that economic strength, and not only 21st, it is always, if you go through history, you will always realize there is something called quantitative curves that define who are the leading powers. The quantitative curves will tell you that those who dominate leading technologies dominate world market. Those who dominate world market will be leading military powers. So this connection is important. If Ukraine war is what is creating an instability in the world. It's a fight between the US and its allies to retain the economic control of the world, and the other side, which is wanting to rationalize and multipolarize the economic system of the world. And where are we? So if you want to be a great power, you cannot be second fiddle to anybody. If you cannot be a second fiddle to anybody, you need to have critical technologies in your control. So your military equipment that the military uses, frontline equipment, must be sourced from within the country. It must have the critical technologies rooted within the country. And for those of you who want to understand this part, read the French strategy. That's what de Gaulle laid out post-1945. You saw the writing on the wall for the international system, that the US will be the world leader and rest of us will have to play second fiddle. He says, I'm not willing to do that. So arms, military industry, and arms exports became an extremely important critical element of French economy. And he said, by 1960s, we should be exporting arms to 100 countries, and they achieved that. So today, France is capable of making every critical technology within that country. It's not dependent on anybody. But when you created that capability, now you can actually buy from anyone, you can globalize, you can be interdependent, there's no problem. And that's what France has done. This is somewhere we messed up. And we are trying to correct here. And it's not enough to have slogans. Atmanirbhar Bharat is a good slogan, but go beyond that and then see where it all needs to be done. And just before summing up, I'll give critically what needs to be done. Military capability or national defense is dependent on the interface between four verticals. And that is the user, which is the military, the defense or industry. Third is the research and development. And fourth is the academia. They all should be integrated and interfaced with each other. If that is not done and they work in isolation, we'll continue to have a problem and we'll take a long time. And I'm just last week when I've been in Coimbatore and I interact with teachers, and I was horrified to hear that there are colleges that are dropping disciplines of physics and mathematics because students are not coming for it. When a country doesn't have fundamental sciences being taken up by their students, you have a problem in technology access, technology development. And this is the main area that we should be addressing in the context of our national defense strategy. We are capable of defending ourselves. 62 can never happen again. We can sort out in terms of, even if a Chinese threat, there's something called local dominance, local power superiority that we can bring in against the Chinese in the areas that they can threaten us. We can sort them out. I consider Pakistan as a nuisance, and we know how to deal with that nuisance. But two-front theory or two-front side, it's not easy for China to create that. But if it creates, we will have a serious issue because we are not modernizing at the rate that we want to. And the Air Force today is at 32 squadrons as against 45. These are issues of concern which we need to do. Thank you very much. I'll wait for the questions.
Thank you, Air Marshal, for that comprehensive conceptual framework on how we have come thus far and where we have to go. Now I invite Mr. Balamurugan, who is online. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. It's my privilege to be speaking on an online. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to be there in person because of some meeting. I couldn't be there. I look for better next time. Actually, as for the Air Marshal has clearly laid down the path that critical technology where R&D is one of the pillars. I will just talk only on that, what we have done. For example, if you just see the CVRDE, Combat Vehicle Research and Development Establishment, if you take the origin of that, considering the 1962, we went for the licensed production of the Vijayantha tank at Avadi. So prior to that, there is no lab of DRDO at Avadi. So we formed a unit from Vagamandnagar, and then subsequently it was made as a detachment, and it was a full-fledged lab. And in summer 1975, it was redesignated as CVRDE, Combat Vehicle Research and Development Establishment. Basically, I just want to take the case of CVRDE and what we are doing, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Basically, it's not the word in CVRDE, it is being done practically. And of course, between 1975 and now, Arjun main battle tank Mark 1 has been developed, and that is for the armed forces, and has been inducted, and it is under operationalization has been done. Now, recently we got the order for the next higher version of the Arjun MBT Mark 1 Alpha, which 118 tanks, 2 regiments been ordered, and likely to be induction will likely to start in somewhere in mid of 2024. And apart from that, the Arjun story, we are also having developed the Arjun variants. I'll just take the recent products so that the technology, what we are doing in CVRDE will be known, of course. And then end of that, I will also talk about the DRDO major contributors in the various domains just to showcase it. And we made a Arjun ARRV also, which is basically recovery and repair tank. And of course, this has got the capability of recovering and repairing the Arjun tank when it gets bogged down in the battlefield. Of course, we, based on the core competency in CVRDE in different domains, we also ventured into the LCA, light combat aircraft. In that, if you just see that the all the auxiliary mounted aircraft mounted auxiliary gearbox is being has been developed by CVRDE, designed and typed out by the CEMILAC, the design certifying agency, and is flying in all LCAs as of now. And one small thing I want to tell you that the bearings, when we designed the LCA, was imported. Now we took a pain of developing the indigenous bearing of aircraft quality within the country. And of course, one vendor from Gujarat came forward. It's not, when you talk about bearing, you may think it's a small element, but considering the aircraft quality bearings and the speed in which it's operating, it's highly challenging. It took almost 4 to 5 years to develop the bearing. And I want to inform the audience that the indigenous bearing has been successfully introduced by the CEMILAC, and it will be undergoing bulk production in that. Basically, the strategic dependence on the high-speed bearings, aircraft bearings, we are slowly removing it. Based on the success, we are also trying to develop the strategic bearings for the DTRE developed products, and a lot of Air Force, they are coming forward asking us to develop the bearings in which it has become obsolescence, or it's not available, source is not available. That's one part. So coming back to the tank technology itself, so far we have been importing, if you just talk about Mark 1, it is having around 62% import. Basically, we are importing the engine, transmission, gun control system, gunner's mine sight, and so on. But now, last 2 to 3 years, we launched a indigenization program where the engine is being developed with the partnership of BEML. Transmission is developed with the partnership of L&T. So CVRDE design being production is made by L&T, and so on. Almost all the imported systems, gun control system, we are indigenized, almost proven. Then common panoramic sight and these systems, we are launching the indigenization. Now is going to happen shortly. So if you talk about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, almost I can say another 2 to 3 years, entire tank systems and technologies will be within the country because we have launched all products, all development projects within CVRDE and with other DRDO labs. So the Atmanirbhar Bharat, the defense preparedness is when you have our own technology, then you can life cycle support for the systems will be much better, and life cycle upgrade we can do easily. So that is one part of it. And second is, if you just see this as a DRDO, we have the 8 clusters working in different domains. Basically, for example, we have the ACE cluster where we have the Pinaka rockets, multi-barrel rocket system has been launched. We have the ATAX developed by Pune-based lab, where it is having the highest range in the entire world. It is having 48-kilometer artillery range, whereas no other country achieved that. And we have the larger bridging systems, which Army can use it and cross it, composite bridges, and with higher capabilities. And then if you just see the Hyderabad labs, they are working the missiles, Agni 5, and then you are also talking about the BrahMos missiles and so on. And everything is got its own advantages. Of course, Air Marshal will be knowing that about the advantage of the missiles and it's being fitted in various fighter aircrafts and being used. Coming to the Bangalore-based labs, we are making radars, which will with which it can be worked. A lot of advantages, different ranges. I cannot go specifically ranges because of the secrecy of this. Then we have a air defense system made by DRDO available. Of course, it's Indian system available, and of course supplemented by other import system also by the armed forces. But DRDO has made the Indian systems. And if you talk about the ASAT, which has been demonstrated in 2019, it is a remarkable development by DRDO, and it is able to accurately aim and hit the satellite at low orbit, traveling at 300 kilometers per second. Of course, I will not be naming each of the missiles because of the time constraint. And even to the COVID period also, we did a lot of contributions to the country. Basically, we have done the ventilators at the time when it's not available. Then when it was, it's all towards the preparedness of the country. Indirectly, it helps defense also. And then you talk about the medical oxygen plants. It was coordinated by DRDO technology made in the country based on the, of course, the oxygen generating system in the aircraft that has been used to make it, and so on. And of course, Netra, AVAX, that you are aware is DRDO developed, is being used effectively for the country's defense preparedness. And of course, the torpedoes for naval, the sensors, sonars, torpedoes being developed again for the tri-services, basically Navy, torpedoes, and then sonars for the Navy angle, we are developing it. And if you just see the DRDO has got around 52 labs, and then each are working their domain. I will not be developing each of the labs, even for example, ADRD, they are developing parachutes which heavy weights can be dropped, and it's also used for the Gaganyaan mission. So, and DRDO also launched a lab called DOISL, basically the young scientist lab, where the director of the lab himself is less than 35 years, and they have been asked to develop the core technology areas like quantum computing, like that. And so the defense preparedness of the country has been enabled by DRDO much better. Of course, now we are having a practice of having the DCPP, that is a development and production partner, wherein we are taking the industries on board. And again, the defense production capability of the industries will be enhanced by handholding of DRDO in that mode. Basically, we want to develop them not only production partner, we want them to design, develop also at some point of time. Now, government also encourages design and R&D by the private industries, defense PSUs. We are supporting, DRDO supporting them. So in overall, if you just see that between the 1962, where for example, that HF started production the Vijayendra tanks, and CVRDE has gone into a bigger role of taking the various tanks indigenously, and also all subsystems have been developed. Same way, all labs across DRDO has worked out. And you may be seeing papers like Doklam. After Doklam, CVRDE has taken a project on priority to develop the light tank for the country, because light tank was felt as a need immediately. So we'll be, for information of the audience, because the open domain is coming, we'll be rolling out the prototype in April 2023 successfully. So that means with the requirement of Army at high altitude, it's basically 25-ton vehicle amphibious capability. It will be air transportable and a lot of benefits. So this way we are also dynamically aligning with the requirements of defense. And I just want to put across the audience whatever work we have done by DRDO. And I like to thank the Madras Medical Association for their joints, and Mr. Sathiya Moorthy for coordinating the entire panel. And then thanks for the opportunity. Good day to all of you. And then I'll wait for the further interaction. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, For most of us in this audience, I think this is the first exposure to something what the DRDO is doing and different production and procurement, etc. Now over to you, Dr. Stanley.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And thanks to MMA and Policy Matters for organizing this event. I've almost become a regular visitor at MMA programs, thanks to Group Captain Vijay Kumar. And thanks to the Marshal and the Balamurugan for giving a very comprehensive, enlightening, speech on India's defense preparedness. So I was telling the Marshal before this session began that I'm not a defense expert. I look at foreign policy and geopolitics, so I would do the same thing here. I would try to understand India's, China challenge, India's ties with China through the prism of geopolitics and foreign policy, in which, of course, defense preparedness and defense policy would play a major part. You see, much has been written about the 1962 war. We continue to produce fine books about what happened in 1962. So I would say that our collective memory has stayed so strong. So we continue to explore what led to the war, what went wrong in India's ties with China. And over the last 60 years, India and China have evolved a great deal. You look at China, which is now the world's second largest economy. They have built the world's largest navy. It is a big military power, which is almost on the brink of triggering another Cold War with the United States, which remains the world's most important military and economic power. And you look at India, India is now the world's fifth largest economy. We are a nuclear power, unlike in the 1962. India has also evolved, it has become a much bigger, stronger, confident economic power, economic and military power. And it is, expected to play a major role in the Indo-Pacific region in the coming years and decades. That is, that cannot be, that is undeniable. So despite the evolution of both these countries, now both India and China are nuclear powers, but despite the evolution of the status of both countries, we could see that the friction points on the border still stay, right? Because we saw that in the Galvan clashes. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was another incident which was, which appeared in the media reports. After that, the government confirmed. The defense minister talked about it in parliament. So the question is, 1962, yes, as I said, we know what happened, what went wrong in 1962. The clashes started in 1959 in Longju and other parts of the Himalayan border, which eventually led to an open war in 1962. But now the question, I think we are still debating what triggered the Galvan clashes, why the Chinese are, being more and more aggressive on the Himalayan border with India. I think the debates would go on. In the meantime, we can reach our own possible explanations and conclusions. So in my sense, China has always historically looked at India, through the prism of its own rivalry with great powers. So you can see that there could be different phases in China's, relationship or India-China relationship. Let's say from 1949 to 1962, from 1962 to the end of the Cold War and the post-Cold War period. So as Vijay Gokhale, India's former foreign secretary, recently wrote in a Carnegie paper. So in the 1962, from the 1949 to 62 period, China wanted India to stay neutral. It wanted to exploit Nehru's Asian solidarity, appeal to India's relationship with the developing world, etc., etc. But the post-62 period, when China's relationship with the Soviet Union was also collapsing on the one side, and on the other side, China was warming up to the Americans. From the 1970s, China would establish some kind of a quasi partnership or alliance with the United States. Whereas on the other side, as Air Marshal has already pointed out, India was moving closer to the Soviet side in the 1970s. So China's focus was actually to draw India away from the Soviet Union. And also China was also exploiting, India's foreign policy challenges by building stronger ties with Pakistan. And in the post-Cold War period, you can see that, the engagement period, which started in the late 1980s with Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's visit to China. So in the post-Cold War period, that would pick up. You would see a period of engagement, tranquility, and also a period of, inclination on both sides to address the border question. So, and also a period of economic engagement, trade, etc., etc. But in these three phases, China would look at India through its prism of great power rivalry. Initially, from the 1949 to 1662 period, China was obsessed with the United States, and then with the Soviet Union, and then in the post-Cold War period. Now, as what we are seeing is that China has definitely, the United States is China's #1 geopolitical rival. And China looks at India as a potential counterweight to China's own regional ambitions. And China wants to stop India from becoming, an ally or a B team of the United States in this. Even a couple of days ago, you would see that China's ambassador to France had talked about the concept of Indo-Pacific is a construct developed by the Americans to contain China, and India is being a part of that. China continues to voice concerns about this. So what happened on the border, I think now a possible explanation is that Chinese are using limited low-level coercion as a deterrence tactic. So the message is that, yeah, India could be your counterweight, but see what we could do to the Indians. Or the message to New Delhi is that if you are pivoting completely to the American side, if you are going to become a pillar in the United States Indo-Pacific strategy, don't forget that you have an unsettled, demarcated, undemarcated, undefined Himalayan border, thousands of kilometers long Himalayan border with us. So, and the Chinese are also doing this because, they expect low levels of geopolitical setback for this strategy, because they don't expect India to become more aggressive in its response to Chinese coercion. And so the cost, in their cost benefit or in their risk assessment, it could create issues with India in its relationship with India. Tensions would rise, but at the same time, they don't expect this to explode into a full-fledged conflict between India and China. So it is a low risk, low level coercive policy, which the Chinese are doing on the borders as a deterrence tactic. This is one possible explanation. So how India is going to address this challenge, So on the one side, there are these fears of this leading into a much bigger conflict. But on the other side, as India is trying to do, is to manage this, frictions on the border. So one point is that, as again, Ambassador Gokhale pointed out, is that India has to emphasize on the bilaterality of its relationship with China. So the question is whether you would be able to effect a change in Chinese thinking. When China continues to see India as a subset, as through its instead of looking at India through the prism of let's say its great power rivalry, rather than that, India would be able to effect a change in China's approach towards India, or to look at India as a regional power. To make that happen, India has to actually build its capacities. India has, as I said at the beginning, India has already evolved a great deal. But at the same time, when you do a comparison in terms of its resources, in terms of economic development, etc., so there is asymmetry in terms of hard power, whether it is economic power or military power. So the focus has to be on, in a long-term strategy, the focus has to be on building India's own capacities, where your defense preparedness would come, where your internal cohesion will come. The resilience of your democratic institutions will also come. That is one natural advantage India has vis-a-vis China. And also, at the same time, your economic development, everything, all these elements would come in. So this is a long-term approach India has to take. And this approach China in a different way. The Chinese had done the same thing. From, if you look at China's foreign policy from a realistic point of view, right? From 1949 to mid 1950s, China was a Soviet ally. There were communist brothers. You have the Soviet Communist Party on the other side. You have the Chinese Communist Party on the other side. But despite being this ideological brotherhood, in the 1970s, you see China actually moving to the United States. They would host President Nixon, they would host Henry Kissinger, and the China would actually break away from the Soviet Union and become a quasi-ally of the United States, which Mao called the imperial power. So they would actually go, they would go beyond their own ideological convictions to strike a realistic relationship with the United States because they wanted to join this international effort to contain the Soviet Union. They identified their primary challenge and they were ready to deal with the United States. And from the 1970s until recently, China was very much focused on building, strengthening this relationship with the United States, irrespective of its own ideological convictions. And it is only now, after attaining the confidence, the military and economic confidence under President Xi Jinping, the Chinese are directly challenging the United States. So, this is what the Chinese did. The Chinese model is. But compared to this, one of the challenges India faces is that China and the United States do not share a border. They don't have a Himalayan border. So this is one of the major challenges India will have to face. So the question before India is that when China is determined to needle India on the border or to use this as a deterrence tactic against India becoming a B team of another great power, what India has to do. Should India step up its, or should India join any kind of an alliance system to contain China? Is that the way forward? Or should India reassert itself, retain its strategic autonomy, its independence, build its capacities, and emphasize itself as a major regional power? So India, you look at its resources, just look at the map. We have a huge, peninsular coast on the one side. And in terms of the size of this geography, in terms of the population, in terms of the size of its economy, which keeps growing, India has all the natural potentials to become a regional power. So the question is how we are going to use this, So this is the challenge India is facing. So the border challenge is an immediate challenge, which you have to address. At the same time, you need to have a long-term strategic plan. You need to have a grand strategy to transform yourself. I think this is whether India would be able to effect this change in Chinese thinking, whether India would be able to focus on its capacity building to rise as a regional power in Asia. I think that would determine India-China relationship going forward. I'll conclude here and then happy to take this discussion forward in the question and answer session. Thank you very much.
It was a wonderful case study, which is also our immediate concern to the past years and will remain so in the future also. Now we take some questions. Introduce yourself, and I would also like the students who are here to participate. Please introduce yourself and keep the question brief, please, and also address the question to only one speaker.
This is Rakesh. I am a consultant and a trainer. This specifically is for all of you, in fact. This is a matter of national defense per se. The developments that we are talking about has happened in decades. China has been an offset production space for technology and other aspects for US after it has broken off from USSR. The current spend, which is there in terms of defense spend, is roughly around $298 billion US.
Question, please.
The question is very specifically, we have the human resources of 541 million. As you were talking about the human resources that is required for technicians and others to build the nation, logistics and other aspect. Another very important aspect is the research and development that we do. Currently, we are at 1%. What is a realistic figure by when we can reach to this level where we can compete with nations and also as a defense strategy, oppose them if it is required, being on neutral grounds as well?
If I understand, is there a question related to where do we reach parallelly with China's ability? Am I right? Okay. Well, as I pointed out in my lecture, India is a paradox. There's been an excellent strategy and strategic continuity in the domains of space and atomic energy. We had objectives very clear and we pursued it, and we've actually created that capability. With respect to defense, I think it's been sort of nebulous, right? And one of those reasons is to actually have a national strategy. Like I gave you the example of France, and lay down very clearly which are the critical areas where we have no option but to create, irrespective of what the cost is, create those capabilities. And those capabilities don't just come overnight by investing only in industry and capital investment. It has to be addressed in education, academia, research, industrial investment, and of course the user's input. So this is where I think this is what has caused us to lag back. That's one. Obviously, when you now translate that into figures, what you said is right. Our investments in R&D has been abysmally low, but we are now moving up. Okay, and I think an average in today's context, I think if you go past 3.5% in your research and development investment, that would be give you a significant leap forward to address some of those issues. But more important than that, that is necessary. But more important than that is to create a national strategy as to where we need to actually work hard. You don't have to make everything. I mean, there are a lot of things that are available and you have the capability to make them. But critical technologies, the world does not give you access to it. And you have to leverage. If you're buying and giving huge business to somebody else, you have to leverage the technology that you want. That's what China has done. To build technological capability, there is a complex roadmap that you have to create. And that involves your own research and development, your investments, your education, your leveraging businesses, your ability to espionage and take technologies. And there's a lot available in the open source itself. Learn from that as well. There are steps and there is an experiential knowledge that gets built up. We want everything overnight, and therefore our strategies suffer from that flaw. You need to have a good roadmap. And this is where there are many committees, starting off from C. Subramaniam's committee in 1969, which have recommended that India create a National Aeronautics Commission on the lines of Space Commission. It's not been taken up as yet. And I was the committee leader who recommended in 2014. It's not Aeronautics Commission anymore, it is the National Aerospace Commission. It has not been taken up as yet. Unless you do that, that national strategy will be a problem still, despite a lot of improvements that we've done. There's a lot of new policy changes that have come in, but I think we need that roadmap. And that's where China is scored. If you study China, they bought as much equipment from Russia and the old Soviet Union as we have done, if not more, and just monitor. Every weapon system that they've taken from Russia, they've reverse engineered, they've produced a better one of their own. Have you done that? That's a good question to give you the answer.
Mr. Balamurugan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, actually, I'll just say that there is a clear roadmap for the next 30 years by each of the DRDO labs. Something pioneering, something current, just taking leap forward, but something radical. So if you just see even the government of India is promoting that we should pioneer the technology, start exporting the technology, not only system technology has to be exported. So many labs are working in those kind of R&D, and I'm sure maybe another 5 to 10 years, we'll be exporting many of the defense technologies abroad. So I wish that status should come within 5 to 10 years, and we are working towards that. Thank you.
Next question.
One point to add, please. And that's an extremely important point, what Dr. Balamurugan said. When you now invest in industry and create an industrial capability, they have to be export oriented. There are select technology where you want to keep it to yourself, but exports, give the boost to actually further research and development, constantly improve. And economically, it becomes viable. If you only depend on internal orders, that's what the foreign vendors want you to do. That is self-defeating. That's the most important thing. Again, examples are Israel. They all live under constraints, but they are a great exporting nation for arms industry. France, I've given you the example. Even China, Brazil, these are things.
So I'm just keen to know what is the present form of battle. In other words, Chitranath, MMA member. In other words, what is the kind of war? Is it plain battle tanks war in the Ukraine-Russia war? And if China were to attack us tomorrow, will it be hundreds of battle tanks coming across the border? What kind of battle will be happening? Right.
Well, wars are complex. And I think you must, for all the public, observe and study and try and comprehend what's happening in Ukraine. It's a complex war. And as I said in my address, war is ultimately, it's all about politics. It's a political objective that defines ultimately how that war will be fought. And how that war will be fought will depend on your capability as well. So you need to retain the dominance of the narrative and the conduct of the war. And when you do that, you will actually face the war the way you want to. Whether you use tanks, whether you use missiles or extensive air power, like the Americans would come and destroy and immediately create mayhem and then go and do what they want. Each one has their own strategy, but it's all defined by the political objective. So the Ukraine war is not just a war, it's a very complex geopolitical contest, the geoeconomic contest, it's a technological contest. And this war will go for a long time. And you need to study that. So as Stanley pointed out, in our analysis, in my analysis, I don't see a major war between China and India. Neither is China foolish, nor is India adventurous, right? And they're all civilizational, both are civilizational states. They have tremendous geopolitical maturity. But this needling also is to keep you under pressure. And we need to grow out of that. We need to take the offensive and put them on the defensive. And it can be sorted out.
Not adding anything to the war, just about the last point. Yeah, I also think that we don't face any imminent possibility of an open conflict between India and China. But at the same time, India stood up to the pressure tactics on the border that you can see. But at the same time, in the long term, you need to have a long-term policy because the Chinese are not going to change this overnight. Yeah, you can't be reactive also. So you need to be inventive. You need to find a long-term approach of affecting a change in China's approach towards India, and then building a sustainable, way to manage the competition between these two countries. Because at the end of the day, these two countries are going to be two regional powers in Asia. I think that is undoubtable. China is already there. India has the potential to reach there. So you need to find a mechanism, a framework to manage your competition with China.
Hello, my name is Rajasen and I'm a retired aerospace scientist. My question to Mr. Balamurugan is, you talk about exporting weapons and things like that. What is the status of research and development in India in those areas? Because
actually, in that angle, I will just say that we are the starters. Recently, for example, the attacks developed by ARD, DRDO Lab has got a lot of, I may not be able to tell the figures, but large export order to the South Asia and this some Arabian countries. Okay. And we are, even though we are trying to push a lot of things forward, and we, as I said, still we are trying to import certain and then make as part of this equipment, but it's basically through system engineering. But maybe another 3 to 5 years, we'll be having our own technologies where we can outbeat the outbid the world, and then we'll try to export. As per the battle tank technology is concerned, I will put it, it will take minimum 5 to 7 years to have a critical technologies and pioneering technologies, and which can be exported to others. I just want to take one example is we are trying to develop an active protection system. Recently, Israelis came and discussed they want to develop collaboratively. Then I told them, no, we want to do on our own. They said we are taking 16 years to develop the technology. Now we mastered it and we had a lot of beatings. Then I told them, let our team also take the same beating, but we will not take 16 years, we'll take 3-4 years only. But we'll develop a better system and give to the world. So there is a confidence we are having and the country, because the infrastructure of the country has gone better and the kind of test facilities are better. So we are confident we'll start exporting more, maybe another 5 years from DRDO. Thank you.
Any other questions from the floor? Colonel?
Sir.
I'm Colonel Hariharan. My question is particularly for Stanley and the Air Marshal, pertains to the lack of civil-military integration. As far as defense policies are being laid down, if you take a look at China, this is one of the things they achieved after Deng Xiaoping took over power in the last 10 years. They developed long-term plan. Will we ever achieve this because of the colossal ignorance of policymakers to the defense studies itself? This is my question to both of you.
Well, it's a very important question, and all great powers, and we want to be a great power. We all, and we're quite rightly so, for a country of 1.4 billion people and a subcontinent, we should be there. But great powers are not based on military capability, economic wealth, and technology alone. Great powers fundamentally start from great societies. And what you said is extremely important. And great societies, every citizen must have the inbuilt passion to contribute to national defense. And therefore, we should have started with compulsory military service. We should have had a program on that. We are a huge population, the challenges are many, and we should have found a solution for that. And more importantly, those who come into critical areas of governance, be it bureaucracy or the political leadership, they should have military service. In more than 250 years of US history, there's not been a president without military background and military service, other than the first guy who came without military background and with a dodging history of, military service, was Bill Clinton. And of course, now things have changed because Obama has come after that. But they are going to change because there's a lot of debate internally that's going on. And if you look at Russia, France, Germany, all this is quite naturally seen as mandatory. Japan is debating. To build a national military culture, that is necessary. And we need to debate this. We need to find a solution to this.
But we have got over 380 viewers watching online, and thank you for your response. I got a number of questions actually. We'll try and accommodate next 5 to 10 minutes, as many questions as possible. First question addressed to Air Marshal Matheswaran is from Mr. Pradeep from Chennai. He said, sir, the number of squadrons presently with the Air Force is around 30 plus, as against the sanctioned squadron limit of about 45 plus. And how well it affects operational preparedness of India. And he also had, by procuring high quality, high expensive aircraft like Rafale, do you think the number of squadrons can come down so that we can meet the commitment vis-a-vis the cost, vis-a-vis preparedness?
Well, this is one question very constantly we've heard from the civil servants earlier. You've got a Su-30, so one Su-30 can take care of, can do the job of, let's say, 10 MiG-21s or 8 MiG-21s. Can we reduce the number of scores? It doesn't work like that. There is a certain numbers have its own importance. And given the environment in which we live in, given the large threats, you have a superpower virtually on a northern side, constantly needling us, and you have a perennial problem, I call it as a nuisance, on the western side. And therefore you have to keep your powder dry, and that needs a certain minimum optimal size of military forces. So that 45 squadron has been arrived at that calculation. And technology will keep leaping forward. Despite that, those numbers are absolutely necessary. So 32 squadron is, is an issue, but the Air Force on many other areas have done tremendous development in technology terms. It's a network force. Its airlift capabilities are very good now. And then we are not looking at capturing somebody else's territory. So we are in our defense requirement, I mentioned the word, in the local domain against China, there's something called local balance of power. The force that we can bring in, and the force, China has many other strategic threats and strategic priorities. He cannot bring his entire force onto the Western Theater Command. So what China can field, and it's also hampered by the airfields in the Tibetan Plateau, which are way above 4 kilometers, 4.5 kilometers in what they can operate from. And we have the advantage of very closer airfields, and ranges are, much easier. And they're almost at sea level to 500 meters elevations. And therefore, the local balance of power is always in our favor, even now with the Air Force down to 32 squads. Of course, it's a different game when there is a two-front war, which I said that possibility is a remote possibility.
Thank you, sir.
But 45 squadron we need to build it up as quickly as possible.
There's a question, Mr. Balamurugan. Before that, one more question addressed to, before we let you go, Mr. Air Marshal. How will you rate the nation's defense preparedness in a scale of 1 to 10? Yes.
Well, in terms of our threats, see, it's about, are we capable of handling the threats that are there around us? Absolutely. Yep. I've already explained that. So there's no problems on that in the sense. But why do you want to be always under pressure and tension? So get your forces so that you're comfortably sending out. And remember, your victory is winning without war. So create the deterrent capability and build that.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes, Mr. Raju from Chennai. Would like to add? There's one question for you. I'm not placing it there. There's a question from Raju to Mr. Balamurugan, sir. He says, sir, indigenization of the equipment on import dependence has almost come down from 45%, which was earlier. You mentioned your address, it's come down very drastically, and it will be almost nil in next 1 or 2 years. Under this context, as he said, how much of this indigenization is accepted by our armed forces in effective discharge of their dependence? Actually, is there any sort of, always there is a mindset of the people that import equipment does better than our indigenous? How do you change the mindset in the mind of the people who use these equipments?
Actually, whenever we develop a indigenous equipment, it's not that simply developing and giving. For example, when you develop a armored fighting vehicle engine, there is a qualification cycle called NATO cycle. 400 hours engine has to run continuously without any problem. Then it meets the international standards. So we will be qualifying the engine to that kind of testing. Same as a transmission. You have to do 8-hour testing and flawlessly to perform, and then it meets the international standards. So wherever we are developing the technologies and we know the world standards of testing, it will be subject to that. And then one more advantage is when you develop immediately, we can develop to the Indian weather and the climatic conditions, the temperature profile. If you just go to, for example, Russia, they take up a low temperature, more than 40 degrees, it may not operate. But whereas whatever we are developing, nowadays we are trying to develop to 65 degree or 70 degree hardening so that it will work comfortably in India. So all efforts of qualification and then fine-tuning to the Indian environment conditions is being done by DRDO, and that way it is much better qualified system when it comes from India within the country.
Excellent, sir. Sir, one more question to you is from Mr. Deshpande from Coimbatore. Is this what's the efforts of R&D by DRDO? I think the premier institution for most of the defense works here in recent achievement, which resulted in substantial reduction in import dependence. I know we hear quite a bit of DRDO's achievement. Maybe you would like to share maybe one or two.
Actually, it's a very broad question, and rightly as I said, import dependence will be from CVRDE angle. It will be coming down because when another 2 to 3 years it may come down heavily because we'll be established the technology and system within the country. But if we talk about the missiles, for example, if missiles are not available for imports. Normally, strategy system will not be available, but DRDO has developed all the kinds of missiles, surface to air to air, and then so on, and including the BrahMos, which has been done by colleague organization, BrahMos Aerospace. So these are the things which will never be available for import and be developed within the country. Even the ASAT. That can be have a multiple potential which can be used for different kind of warfare. So that base is light, and it's a hypersonic missiles. So the base technology is there, we can develop like anything. So it's a lot of way to go, but somewhere it's import substitution directly, and something are not available, and we have the better technology and missiles in the country like that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a question to Stanley Johny, Dr. Stanley Johny. This is. So what's your opinion is about Pakistan nuclear threshold? The 2-3 questions are I'll combine all of them. You can, this first question, then the same person asked another question to you. You mentioned in your speech during the Rajiv Gandhi period, the engagement with the other countries were very cordial and we had a good relationship. How do you find the engagement of the present government in terms of with other countries, especially our neighborhood? Then he's also asking, what's your view? If you wish, you can answer this question. What's your view of the recent comment by the foreign minister of the Pakistan against our prime minister? Do you think diplomatically is it right on his part to do so? And do you think India handled the situation well? Yeah. Handled the situation well at international forum?
I think the second question about the engagement between the present government and China or the neighborhood, the question was on?
Yes. The first one is during Rajiv Gandhi time, the cordial relationship.
I mentioned Rajiv Gandhi because Rajiv Gandhi's visit, I think, was an important point, a starting point of engagement with China.
How is Indian foreign policy vis-a-vis that period in terms of
I think, see, there are challenges as well as engagement. Especially in the first 5 years of this government, I thought that in the neighborhood, India faced a number of challenges. India faced resistance in several neighborhood countries, which have traditionally, historically, very good relationships with India. But at the same time, I think India has tried to fix some of those issues and has built, again, with Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka, in terms of economic crisis, India moved forward. India took a very proactive position in helping the Sri Lankan people. So, yeah, there were challenges. India faced some kind of resistance. But especially the setbacks in Nepal, and even some of the comments made by the ministers had created uproar from Bangladesh, even from which have historically very good ties with India. But I think, especially in the second term of this government, the government has taken the neighborhood relationship in the neighborhood very seriously and tried to fix some of the problems which arose in the previous term. And then I think, I mean, it is an ongoing process, but I think they have taken it seriously, and India has built strong ties in the neighborhood. India continues to maintain.
Excellent. One more they asked is, what's, in your opinion, is the Pakistan nuclear threshold? Maybe Air Marshal, any one of you can answer.
Nuclear threshold. Well, it's quite obvious. Countries go nuclear to create a different capability to ensure their survivability. Positively, so in Pakistan's case, it is very clear, and of course there are various generals who commented and done exercises. We know, and I don't want to go into describing what those nuclear red lines are, but it's all about you cross a certain level, and if I quote one of the exercises that have been done, then it's about if there is a significant destruction of the military capability of Pakistan, you're crossing the red line. If there is a significant destruction of the economic capability of Pakistan, it says you're crossing a red line. And the very viability of Pakistan as a nation state comes into question. Again, to divert attention, they could do anything. So these are the general red lines which are generally talking about. But basically, any nation, when US went nuclear, the Soviet Union rushed across to do everything and go nuclear as quickly as possible to ensure balance of power. US allies, France and UK, they were great powers in the past. They didn't want to get submerged under US shadow completely. So they went nuclear. They stole technologies from the US itself to do that, right? And China did the same thing. India went because China went nuclear. And of course, Pakistan is against India. But in the larger domain, when countries want to be great power, and Pakistan is not in that category. When countries want to become great powers, the unwritten dictum is that a great power, during Mahan's time, you had to be maritime powers. Post 1945, you have to be a nuclear weapon state, straightforward.
Thank you, sir. That's what the whole nation, whole world is hoping on Russia not to use nuclear on Ukraine. There's a lot of discussion happening on that also. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause to our distinguished panelists this evening. Very fascinating insights, and thank you, sir, for patiently answering to all the questions. Thank you, Air Marshal. It's always a pleasure to listen to you every time. And thank you, Mr. Balamurugan, for joining us online. Thank you, Dr. Stanley Johny. As usual, Sathiya Moorthy, you have been outstanding. As a token of our appreciation, Dr. Balamurugan, you couldn't join. We would like to present you an e-memento because you're not able to come. We'll also present one on your behalf. This is what we do on your behalf. We'll really do this to reach out to a large number of needy children. We buy them a lot of textbooks, and on your behalf, we present to the needy, poor government school children books on your behalf, because the people like you come and speak in MMA, that add a lot of value to us. And I thought, as a token of our appreciation, we'll do that. Thank you so much. May I now request, thank you, sir. May I now request our committee member and also Colonel to join us on stage to present the member. Colonel Harigaran, please come onto the stage. Colonel Harigaran, I know very, very long time you're not there. Please come onto the stage to us on representing memento to the three distinguished panelists. Thank you, Mr. Balamurugan. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, everyone. We come to the end of the session, not on time. Thanks so much, and get home safely till we meet again. The number of programs already mentioned to you. Do join us and enrich yourself. Bye-bye. Good night till we meet again. Bye.
Thank you and good night.